Welcome to Fargo. It's the city of frost and fire. You're going to learn all about this north of Normal Metro, one person at a time. This is the Fargo 5. We're here with Peter Schott from the International Potluck, also known as the Potluck Guy. Hello, Peter.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Why don't you try that? I'll actually turn you up. I can do this. Go ahead.
Right.
There, now we got you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Well, now we're blowing it out. All right. So you, I've known you for a while.
Yep.
You came back when we did the Fargo Meets Japan classes regularly. I think you came to a couple of those. Is that where we first met?
I think we first met through that. Yep. And I brought my kids to a few of them. And they had a good time.
And we've crossed paths on a few things. And we're friends on Facebook. Our mutuals are pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. You seem to be. I mean, for my sins, I'm a realtor at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Premier Properties. I get out and I meet a lot of people. So I try to stay as well connected as possible. But I think maybe whenever I meet somebody new and I'm like, wow, this is a interesting, powerful, influential person. And I look at who I might have a mutual before I send them a friend request. Right. You're already.
It's always interesting.
But you're already their friend. You're a very well connected person. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you're very well positioned, very well connected. How did you get to be such a person? Are you from Fargo originally?
I grew up in North Dakota on a farm about 2 hours from
Another
here.
Farm?
Yep, I did. A farm kid. Went to school at Concordia, lived here for a bit, and then moved away. Kind of a whole long story with all that, but the short part of that is I moved back here about 9 years ago. And
so when you moved back, did you already have all of those connections? Did you make them in Concordia? So you came back as a nobody, just a regular person, a Concordia grad, yep. Which probably helped you, but it wasn't your Concordia connections. Yep. It was, when did you start making connections, or what did you come back to do?
So I lived overseas for about 5 years. I lived in the Dominican Republic and did youth work there. When I came back, I moved to Fargo, and during that first stretch of time that I was here was just going through a lot of things in my own life. I had a health issue where my kidneys were failing, and so I was really focused on getting my health back up and running, and just I had a young family, and just really trying to get established with my career, my health, and all those things. And so
you had been at the Dominican Republic, though.
Yeah, I lived there.
And what were you doing there?
I did child and youth work there. Yeah.
What inspired you to go there?
That's a whole long story.
Okay. Well, what inspired you to be done and come back? I mean, I guess so. You came back for the health issues.
Yeah. So okay. I found out that my kidneys were failing, and they recommended that I come to the States to get my biopsy done and the follow-up. I ended up going to the Mayo Clinic down in Rochester, Minnesota, mm-hmm. and they had an experimental program, an immunosuppressant, where they basically knocked out my immune system for a year. And to give my kidneys a chance to heal, because my immune system kept attacking my kidneys and they weren't working. And so they needed a break from my immune system. It was this trial, I think, was one of 20-some people in the trial. And out of the 20 people in it, I was one of 3 that went into full remission, like fully cured.
Oh, wow.
From the thing. The youngest person in the study was a whole...
Is this drug available now today?
It had been used. It's called Rituxan. It's an immunosuppressant. It had been used for lupus previously, and so I don't know if they're using it commercially for kidney stuff or whatever happened with
autoimmune stuff is wild. It runs in my family. My mother suffers from it, and it can be really tough to pin down. It's amazing that they were able. You were one of the 3, was so you were part of a study. It was like a double-blind thing, so it's unlikely to be a placebo effect. Like you are part of that, and now it's commercially available.
Well, and out of the 3 that got fully healed, they don't actually know why. There was a certain marker in everyone else's blood, and mine didn't have it. And so the doctor said, we don't really know exactly why what happened with you the way that it did. So I moved back, and I was living in Fargo, and I really wasn't involved in anything. It was my home, my job, a couple friends, and that was pretty much it, and kind of wash, rinse, repeat for a few years. Moved back to our family farm in Cullum, North Dakota. Mm-hmm. I wanted to take over a seed business on our family farm.
Oh.
And I'd been doing that on the side. In my day job, I could work remote, so I could kind of do that anywhere. So we thought, well, let's move back. Let's try this out, see what happens with it. Move back and just realize that I didn't want to be a 3-county seed dealer in a small town. It's a great job. It's a great life. And was really great, like living next to the grandparents for the kids. And there were a lot of things that were really wonderful about it, but I just realized it wasn't the life that I was passionate about.
And how old were your kids at this time?
I had one kid at the time, and she was She spent first through third grade, or first and second grade in college.
Okay, so she must have been 7 years old. So you got a 7-year-old daughter.
Yep.
And you're running the seed thing,
Yep.
and you're like, just this isn't what I want to do.
Yep.
It's working. It's paying the bills. Your health is stabilized at this point.
Yeah.
So that's what brought you here.
Yep.
You didn't want to return back to the Dominican Republic at that point. You were like, I'm here. I'm back in the States.
Yeah.
We're gonna stay here. The seeds, it's not working for me.
Yeah.
And so then, you and your 7-year-old daughter, what happens?
So trying to think, well, what do I want to do? And I realized that I wanted to start my own business, and I wanted to work with startups and emerging startups and doing something in technology, but I didn't quite know exactly what that was going to be. And so I wanted to move to a startup hub. And of course, that would have been Austin, Texas.
Sure.
So I had a whole trip planned out to Austin. I had scouting meetings and intro meetings with a bunch of people down there to kind of feel out that area. And one day I looked at a blog post from a company called Myriad Mobile, which is now Bushel, and they were posting about some of the community work, just like building community with Emerging Prairie and some of the stuff that was happening with downtown Fargo.
Yeah.
And I was really excited about that, and so I reached out to some of my friends who were the co-founders of that company. I reached out to them and I said, hey, could I maybe do some contract work with you on this to kind of help you with this position they were trying to fill? And so they
What's your degree in Concordia?
psychology and social work.
So so these aren't super exciting degrees, right? So I'm kind of trying to paint a picture of how it is that you jumped off. So you took that trip down to Austin. What was the impetus?
I didn't take the trip.
You never took the trip,
No,
but you
I
were
had the
planning
plane
on.
ticket booked. I had everything ready, but
And where did you get the gumption to take? Were you invited, or you were like, I'm just going to go there?
I'm just going to go and just make it happen.
Where does such an impetus to so I think there's a lot of people who are out there who are running the family farm,
Yep.
right? Or they're working some 9 to 5 that's paying the bills.
Yep.
They're unsatisfied, and they're saying to themselves, I want to work for myself. I work with those people in a professional capacity as well, where people are like, I want to change my life. But what is it that made you just? How did you know what to even grab or where to even start? What put that in your head?
I realized one day that I didn't know what I was passionate about. I was in the car with my brother one day, and he asked me, "What are you passionate about now?" And I couldn't answer him.
Yeah.
And that really just shook me and scared me to think that it really helped me realize, like, I'm living in this fog and this routine and just kind of reacting to everything, and just realize that it was one of those moments where you have this light bulb turn on that, oh, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
Now I got to make a choice. Do I actually do something about this, or do I just kind of push that aside and just kind of keep going along with what I'm doing? And I just realized that I wanted to try to figure this out. So I hired a coach and just started working.
Like a life coach?
Yeah, like a life coach.
Wow.
And just started working through, like,
That's amazing.
what is Peter passionate about? What does he want to do? And just
Yeah.
kind of through that process said, I really want to start taking some risks and some chances to see what else could I do.
Wow.
And so that Austin trip was part of kind of that exploration for me to figure that out. So I had the trip booked. I had
But you
everything
didn't go.
kind of lined up for it. In the meantime, I reached out to my friends Ryan and Jake who run Bushel and talked about this position. They said, well, why don't you come in? Because I didn't want to work full time for them when I started a business. They said,
How
well,
did you become friends with them?
I met Jake in college. He went to the same church that we did.
Okay.
And
church.
Well, he was going to college at NDSU, and I was working for a company that was in the same building that he was in, and then they were at the same church that we were at. So it was just kind of like I just saw Jake everywhere, and then I got to know his co-founder Ryan Ragoose, and we'd been talking about some different ideas and things that we were going to try to work on.
So what I'm hearing from you is the power of two things, and these are things that I talk about. I do a lot of networking, and in our Friday networking group, we talk about how to start and how to do these things. And what you're telling is what I tell people all the time.
Yep.
You need to. I frame it as you need to know your values, right? But you need to have an intent. You need to be intentional about your life, and you need to be knowing which direction you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? And it sounds like that's what you did. And then you need to just know a lot of people, like the power of networking. It's just some guy you knew from college. You meet him, and you go you get the interview because it's like, hey, you remember me from college? Like it was as simple as that.
Yeah, well, we stayed in touch. I think for me, it's always boiled down to number one, being curious.
Yeah.
And outside of the curiosity, just taking a genuine interest in other people. And I remember I heard a talk from Reid Hoffman once, the founder of LinkedIn, and he talked about you're not building a network, you're building a community, right? So you're just engaging with people around you in a way that it's not necessarily transactional, but it's just a genuine interest in other people. And for me, it's always give first, and then, that stuff always comes back to you tenfold.
I think that's beautiful. And the way you give, and I think maybe that segues great into International Potluck.
Yeah.
That's the way you give. When did that start?
Yeah, so we moved back to Fargo after I'd been gone for 2 years, canceled the trip, and came back to Fargo to work with Myriad Mobile. They had a position that was just kind of lining up with what I wanted to do, but it was even more so. Was inspired by what was happening here, moved back to Fargo, and in that time, another friend of mine, Greg Tavine, who helped found Emerging Prairie, and he's doing stuff with Grand Farm and all these other groups, he said one time, create the community that you want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And that little statement inspired me to, I love food, I love traveling, and I love meeting people who are kind of like open-minded to that type of thing. And just, there's always just amazing stories around food. And so I sent a Facebook message out to a bunch of people that I knew and said, hey, I want to do, and actually I have a screenshot of the initial messages. It's kind of fun to look back on, but I want to do a little food get-together, kind of like a Midwest potluck with an international flair. Would you want to bring a dish just there and some sort of story to how you're connected to it? And so we did this event, and we had 25 people show up to it. Everyone kind of, shared a story. We had a really good time. And for me, it was just this one-time event, and people said, well, this is a lot of fun. When are we doing it again? And I said, again, I don't know. How about 2 months from now? So then a friend of mine had a photography studio, and he said, hey, could we do it at my photography studio? And I said, sure. So we started to plan the event, and we had ended up having like 65 people show up to it, and I knew 10 of them that were there. So there was like a lot of, word of mouth happening with it. And so I'm sitting at this event. There's a ton of people. We're having a good time. And I thought, wow, this is going really well. And then I watched, there was 5 African-American women that they walked around the corner to walk into the event, and I saw them kind of walking and laughing and smiling, and all of a sudden they turned and they saw the room, and their heads all went back like that because it was a room full of white people.
Yeah.
And I realized that, number one, I thought there's something to this event and building this community around this that we could do something really cool with.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, this has to be a space that's inclusive and welcoming to people from, all different backgrounds where we can get together. And this was not that. And to do that, we have to build partnerships with groups that are either represented or working with different cultural communities. And so from there, I started connecting with different nonprofits like the New American Consortium, Lutheran Social Services, the Daughters of the Earth, Buddhists, Bhutanese, and a bunch of different groups to build these different connections to give people a place at this table to say, how can we co-create something together that matters, right? So that was our second event. The third one we did at Gooseberry Park 2 months later. And again, had 65, 85 people show up. I knew about 10 of them that were there.
Wow.
And then people started saying, well, why don't we do these things monthly?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm paying for the rental of the space. Yeah. I'm buying all the plates, and we're setting all this up. I'd be more than happy to do these, every month, but I can't do it on my own. And people are like, well, we'll help. We'll donate money, or we'll volunteer, and that type of thing. And then one of my friends, Andrea Baumgartner from Birnbaum, she had just kicked up her restaurant again back in that mid-mod furniture building on Robert Street, and I was just in there grabbing a bagel one day, and she goes, hey, you should meet Andy Mouse at the Plains Art Museum, because she had been doing some philanthropy work in between restaurants. So she introduced me to Andy over at the museum, and him and I sat, he was the CEO of the museum at the time, and we thought, what if we have a potluck at the museum? Which was a really weird idea, because how often does something like that happen? But we both had this shared vision.
Food plus museum doesn't really sound.
Yeah,
sounds almost dangerous.
Yeah, and so that kicked off what ended up being a monthly partnership, and we're still working with them in different ways today, 8 years later. That is
one heck of a story. It sounds like all it really takes is just a genuine interest in building that community, and see what happens. That's really amazing. As I was listening to your story, I mean, what was really hitting off for me is that you were just saying, well, my friend this, my friend this, my friend this. Like you have so many friends, and you came back, from Concordia with almost no connections, and now you just keep being genuinely interested in people, and anybody could do it.
Yeah,
that's really amazing.
Showing up and putting yourself out there and getting to know people, and I think we have a really amazing community here that responds really well to that.
I think so too. So we're going to go to our first intermission. When we come back, we'll talk about the event that's coming up and what we can expect. That's coming up this weekend, I think. Yep. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. So don't go nowhere.